Welcome, welcome. Yeah, morning, evening, whatever it works. You can watch it online anytime you want, and therefore it could be any time of the day. Let's open in prayer, and we'll get started with our final study here in the book of Song of Songs. Father God, we want to thank you as always. Lord, you are perfect, you are holy, your word is truth, Lord, and I pray that we would surrender to your spirit guiding us and leading us in every aspect of your word, Lord God. There are certain passages or books of the Bible that are an instant blessing to us just because of the words of life that they just emanate off the page. And there's others that require a little bit more work or study or even challenging, Lord God, to recognize the subject matter. This book falls somewhere in the midst of all of that, and we just pray that we would understand it according to your purposes by which you've given it to us. And then we would learn how best to apply it in our own lives individually, as well as we've talked about through the study, counsel those who may be on the cusp of relationships that lead to marriage and a lifelong commitment. So, Lord, we want to invite you here tonight, guide us and lead us in all of our study time, and we welcome every understanding that you want to impart to us through your Spirit and through your word. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, yeah, we are in our last study, and I just was, thinking about this again today, and I kind of approached the study with, well, we should do it, and yet I feel like it's been a fantastic, at least for me, journey through this 8-chapter book that we'll finish off tonight, really talking about how God designed marriage to be, and how when it's executed, if you will, or lived out in a way that God designed it to be, it's supposed to be mutually a blessing and a benefit to both husband and wife and really everybody else in the family and in the community when things are going well at the home. And that includes aspects of things like going well in the bedroom, assuming all things equal and possible and all those kind of things. So I've been personally really, really rewarded by my own study through and opportunity to dive deep into this, and I hope everybody else is feeling that it's a worthwhile investment in our time and effort to go through it. All right, so we kind of picked up here in chapter 7. This is kind of the last hurrah, if you will. We don't know time-wise how far into the marriage they may be here at this last stage. It could still be just a few months after their marriage, although I tend to, in my own speculation, would say I think we're much deeper into the marriage than that, and possibly quite well, into their 30 years or something of marriage that they might be have experienced at this point. We just don't know. And of course, the number one question on everybody's mind, and the one that we certainly cannot answer is, at what point in time did Solomon start acquiring all of those additional wives and concubines and all that goes along with that? We don't know, and we don't know exactly how our Shulamite bride plays into all of that. She may have still been principal, chief, and it's possible. I guess there's 2 or 3 different possibilities when it comes to Solomon's multitude of accumulating wives and whatnot, which is he wasn't supposed to do according to the law of God anyway. These could have been all entirely political kind of marriages. I want peace for our nation, so we exchange, brides and, or whatever, and exchange people for marriage, and somehow that creates an environment where peace occurs rather than war. And so, maybe they're very much, I don't know if we can declare plutonic, but there certainly may have not been out of true love like you would expect here, or we see recorded here in the book of Song of Songs. We just don't know, and we of course know from our study through Ecclesiastes that Solomon did try to maximize pleasure in the one season of his life where he's trying to figure out the meaning of life and where you get pleasure from, and of course he recants that kind of lifestyle and repents, if you will, by saying, vanity of vanities, everything that I tried to gain in pleasure was all vanity. I should have just lived it the way God instructed me to in the first place. So we don't know where any or all of that might fit in, but let's not let it detract from the beautiful love story that is recorded in the Song of Songs. And there is a potential reference here, we'll talk about it a little bit, to the other wives that Solomon may have had. But and if that's the case, then the Shulamite still, as we see in the text, is considered very special. Like she considers herself special to Solomon, and we see in the text that Solomon considers her special to him in a beautiful way. No, it's not an ideal. No, I wouldn't recommend polygamy or accumulating concubines or any of that kind of stuff. I think it's immoral and not how God designed these kind of things to be. But even if it was occurring, and we know it was with Solomon, again, not knowing the details, the Shulamite bride that he fell in love with, maybe potentially the very first woman he married, still at the end, the very conclusion of the book is very special in their relationship. And so that's how we'll pick that up. Okay, so in the last section, or just in the first part of chapter 7, we saw Solomon, referred to as the beloved, reaffirming his incredible love for his wife, and he still appreciates the depth and the richness of her beauty, and he kind of communicates the same kind of descriptions of the wife that he sees before him as the same day as on their wedding day. So, again, if it's years or decades later, he is still appreciating who she is in his life, and that he finds her independent of any changes in age and independent of anybody else he can compare her to. He still finds her to be incredibly attractive to him and desirable. So now here in chapter 7, picking up in verse 10, we're going to see how the Shulamite, the bride, responds back to her husband here at this last recorded encounter with them. So you can turn to whatever way you prefer to get your Word of God into you. On the screen, they certainly are. Chapter 7, starting in verse 10, says this: I am my beloved's, and his desire is toward me. Come, my beloved, let us go forth to the field, and let us lodge in the villages. Let us get up early to the vineyards, go up early to the vineyards, and let us see if the vineyard has budded, or the vine has budded, whether the grape blossoms are open and the pomegranates are in bloom, and there I will give you my love. The mandrakes give off a fragrance, and at our gates are pleasant fruits, all manner, new and old, which I laid up for you, my beloved. Oh, that you were like my brother who nursed at my mother's breasts. If I should find you outside, I would kiss you. I would not be despised. I would lead you and bring you into the house of my mother, she who used to instruct me. I would cause you to drink of spiced wine and the fruit of my pomegranate. His left hand is under my head, and his right hand embraces me. Oh, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, do not stir up nor awaken love until it pleases. Okay, so this is her response back to her husband. And again, he spoke very kindly, lovingly, appreciatively in response to her. We saw that the first part of the chapter last week. And now she's responding back to him and clearly making plans to embrace him and be intimate with him once again. So, as I said, the scene continues here, and there's this sort of mutual expressed desire to resume some level of intimacy. Again, however deep into the marriage and number of years we are looking at here, we don't know, but they're ready to reaffirm their love. So she's reaffirming her love and her commitment back to Solomon like he committed to her earlier in the chapter. She writes or says, I am my beloved's, and his desire is towards me. She has clear confidence that their mutual love and their marriage bonds are currently strong as they perhaps were even on their day of their wedding. She invites Solomon to go with her into the field so that they can lodge together in the villages to extend their romance and time of intimacy. Note that she now takes the initiative here, whereas Solomon was the one who took it upon himself to make the intimacy advance back in chapter 5. Okay, I think I'll interpret that to mean that initiating romance and love within the marriage, this physical intimacy, is something both the husband and wife can do. And that might seem really obvious, but I think some couples, especially starting out, maybe new couples, need to be reminded, hey, if you are interested in being physical with your partner, why don't you ask them or communicate to them your desires rather than, assuming, oh, well, surely they know. So he's made advances towards her, and it was responded to positively because they have a healthy marriage. And she makes advances towards him, and he responds because they have a healthy marriage. So just a point that we can observe from the text. Her request to continue their passionate love, she declares, extends into the springtime, seems to indicate to me that they're not in the springtime yet. I don't know where they are, but she's kind of indicating like once we start, we're going to have this intimacy and we're going to continue to enjoy each other's love, even as we see all of the signs and evidences of springtime returning to our season of life. So she declares she wants to be in the vineyard early in the season to check out whether the vine has budded. Now that reference there to the vine budding could be symbolic of their continuing love or intimacy, or of course it could just be, let's go, as we love one another, let's go check on, the harvest, the thing that makes some money for our family or for whatever, check on these things. But she's making a reference to things haven't begun to bud yet, but we will be intimate and continue our intimacy into both the early and later springtime. So this is poetically paralleled again by the imagery of grape blossoms. So she starts out with, if the fruit of the vine has begun to bud, and then later it's the grape blossoms, kind of the same thing, but it's poetry, so it's in parallel form. And then she also makes a reference to the opening of the pomegranates as they are also in bloom. So she's talking about springtime. Again, we don't have a reference to when the encounter began in terms of the season of the year, but she's talking about looking forward to spring and continuing their intimacy through that time period. So the poetry given to us here serves as a promise to give him more love and more intimacy on whatever journey they're going to. She's kind of talking about they're currently somewhere, they're going to head to these different fields and vineyards, and let's just go together, we'll travel together, we'll check on the status of spring, and we'll just continue to be engaged in a nice loving relationship all the way through. She also seems to, or directly appeals to the aphrodisiac power that is in the Bible associated with mandrakes. I don't know if anybody's ever tested or experimented. It's not like God said mandrakes have an aphrodisiac kind of consistency to them, but you might recall in Genesis, Leah and Rachel were talking about mandrakes and who was going to lie with who, or with Jacob, using the mandrake sort of to be that additional enticement for him, and also potentially to be fruitful in all of their desires to continue to add more offspring. So I don't know if anybody's actually done studies on these mandrakes that are referenced both in Genesis and here in Song of Songs, but certainly the power of suggestion was, I have mandrakes. That means we should be even more desiring intimacy than if we didn't have them. And of course, the imagery of spring and of a bountiful harvest, of these delicacies that one would hope to gain from springtime fruit bearing, is in reference to their continued pleasure, I think, from a symbolic standpoint, of the sexual intimacy that endures for many seasons of life. And so she's kind of making a reference to just an ongoing intimate relationship with her beloved. We would call him Solomon. She then requested that her husband consider her breasts to be, we'll have to use that word a couple more times and then we'll be done after tonight, but he asked for her husband to consider her breasts to be used in the same manner as a nursing babe would use them for with its mother. And she uses the example, her brother nursing from her mother's breasts. Now, she changes that, like she could have referenced herself, like when I was nursing on my mother's breast, but she changes it to this image of a brother, a male child, nursing at his mother's breast. And no, the male baby infant isn't in any kind of way sexually intimate But she's clearly talking to her adult husband and saying, why don't you go ahead and use breasts as if you were a nursing brother, nursing babe on his mother's chest, right? So she's inviting him very overtly to that. Her love and passion are so strong that she's willing to be shunned by the people of the city or the town or wherever they're at. If she were to then find her lover outside in public, she would be so overwhelmed or overcome with her desire to sort of just embrace him and be, physical with him, not overly inappropriately, but she wants to maybe kiss him or embrace him when she finds him out in public. And customarily, couples in a marriage or romantic couples would refrain from any kind of public displays of affection, including maybe hugs or certainly kissing. However, in her exuberance and her love for her husband, the Shulamite was ready to be despised by anybody who thought that her desire to show this affection was inappropriate. And so she's just willing to go against customs or cultural norms in order to actually let him know how much she cares for him in that moment of seeing him. So I'm not necessarily saying it's advisable for couples to go against cultural norms and be more affectionate than the people around them maybe are comfortable witnessing. But what we're seeing here is not a desire to offend or create some kind of situation that the public doesn't want to see. She just wants to express how deeply she desires him, not necessarily trying to offend other people in the town. However, once they were then reunited, they seem to be either together or planning to come back together. Once that they come across one another, can be rejoined together. She would then bring, she says, her beloved into her mother's home, so maybe they're off at a different location, different town, so that they could be even more intimate and well out of the public view. Though in doing so, she would be unconcerned with her family, her family, birth family, whatever, knowing that, hey, husband and I are going to go into our private room and be intimate. She doesn't care that mom knows or brothers know that she's willing, that hey, we know why you're, separating yourself. So she doesn't care about that. But so again, trying to express this attitude of love. She wants to find him, embrace him, even though it might be considered inappropriate if she would find him out in public a little bit. But nevertheless, like the first opportunity they have to come back together in this level of sexual intimacy might be her parents' home. So let's go to my mom's house. She'll make sure we have a nice secluded room and we can do what couples do. And that's not going to worry her or him at all if they do so. In fact, her mother had given her instructions, maybe prior to their wedding or perhaps afterward, but had given instructions on how to act and to be a loving wife, who in part of that being a loving wife is to enjoy and even initiate marital intimacy with her husband. So her mom would approve, even if her mom doesn't want to see or hear or know what is going on in the actual bedroom. Her mother would certainly even, she thinks or declares, make arrangements so that they could be alone. Maybe mom says, hey, the family and I are, whatever you want to call it, going out to dinner tonight. You guys have the house to yourself. Okay? Wink, wink, know what to do. Once alone, however that ultimately occurs, and she's at her parents' house or they are together at her parents' house, they're now would be free to engage in intimacy. And so the Shulamite requests that her husband and her lover then drink from the spiced wine and the juice of the pomegranate that flows from her body. It's highly, poetic. I don't let you just figure out what you want to interpret that. She doesn't say, and I don't have anything to add to that. The Shulamite then describes, and I would say hopefully in a PG-13 manner, the account of her intimacy with Solomon to her friends, also constantly referred to as the daughters of Jerusalem. So, hey, let me tell you, we were able to, come together last night or whatever, and we were intimate, and, not so that she can give them salacious details, I would assume, but so that they can celebrate with her that her desire was fulfilled to be with her husband. And then she begins to describe to the daughters of Jerusalem just a teeny bit of how they came together, right? She says that Solomon, her beloved, placed his left hand under her head while his right hand began embracing her, whatever that looks like. And however that plays out, she was genuinely satisfied, and is now, because they've had that night of intimacy, let's presume, she's now sort of basking in the afterglow of the fact that she actually was satisfied and fulfilled the way she wanted to before they came together. And then in doing so, and remember, I guess maybe she count. I think this is the fourth time she's made this declaration about kind of making reference to when they were first in their betrothal period or their courtship period, and reminding how important it is for those who can't engage in sexual intimacy to not allow the frustration of that to build up. So she's starting to recall how frustrating it was back in their courtship days. That was frustrating, but coming together with my husband was satisfying. That's like the message she's trying to communicate. So, again, don't stir up or awaken love until it's time is the sense that's given there. So, keeping her feelings and desires in check was exceedingly difficult prior to marriage. Therefore, she repeats once again to her friends the wisdom that those who cannot engage in the blessed intimacy right away should not stir up awakened love until it pleases, which would be, of course, in a proper marriage setting. Given where this charge occurs in basically in the last section of the Song of Songs, it seems to speak to the euphoric satisfaction that she has with her husband now. Oh, I was so frustrated when we were in courtship, and all I could do is dream about my future husband and our wedding day over and over and over again, and it was just hard to bear how difficult and frustrating that was. But coming together as husband and wife, the desire can be satisfied, and it was so fulfilling. And daughters, get yourself in a marriage and make sure that's where you are fulfilling all of those desires. So she's, again, encouraging the daughters of Jerusalem, and I think by extension in the writing of the Song of Songs, Solomon is encouraging all brides and all grooms to keep things in check before the wedding and then enjoy all the blessings that come with intimacy after the wedding. So, restating somewhat again, chastity before marriage goes far beyond refraining from premarital sex. The chastity before marriage should include having proper mastery over our thoughts, our desires, that would inappropriately stir up a passion that could not be fulfilled morally, and if immorally fulfilled, robs us of what God designed marriage to be, and especially the wedding night, as she recalls. Okay, and then, so that's her sort of restatement and an invitation to Solomon to be intimate once again. Even though they might be traveling, maybe they can stop off at mom's house and they will find that place. So next, there's going to be this continued declaration of their love once again in verses 8, 6 through 7, I think it is here. Okay, or 5 through 7. So then there's this declaration, and we'll talk about this in a second here. So chapter 8, verse 5. Who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning upon her beloved? I awakened you under the apple tree. There your mother brought you forth, and there she who bore you brought you forth. Set me as a seal upon your heart, a seal upon your arm, for love is strong as death, jealousy as cruel as the grave, its flames of fire, a most vehement flame. Many waters cannot quench love, nor can the floods drown it. If a man would give for love all the wealth of his house, it would be utterly despised. Okay, so just a little bit more poetry here as we begin to wrap up their final evening here, or final season of life. So this seems to be, in verse 5 of chapter 8, an unknown observer is commenting on the couple coming up from the wilderness. It doesn't seem to be Solomon, doesn't seem to be the Shulamite, may not be anybody that we've been introduced to. We don't know. I think it's referred to in the text as a relative. Okay, so if completely unknown, we just don't know. And it could just be, well, we'll talk about it. So the observer could be a relative, a friend, sort of standing around mom's house or whatever and seeing this couple come up. Oh, look how beautiful. She's resting her head on the bosom, the chest of her lover as they ride up on a chariot or whatever it may be. It could also be just a simple narration added by Solomon himself, like there's this independent sort of, narrator who's just making this statement about this because it's poetic. We don't know, but we'll, I guess, possibly assume it's a relative that they've decided to record the words of here. Now, the idea of coming up so often in our scriptures, both Old and New Testament, is referred to or is viewed in relationship to the city of Jerusalem. In almost many, not every occurrence, of course, but many occurrences, someone goes up to Jerusalem or they go down from Jerusalem to some other place. So when it says, who is this coming up, with her head resting on her husband's bosom or whatever, it probably could be a phrase that indicates the couple is now returning home from some trip that they've been on together or reunited and are coming home. We don't know, and it may not be Jerusalem, but it's probably my best guess, given the fact that it's a go up description, which is so common in reference to Jerusalem. The Shulamite, independent of that observation, then the Shulamite makes her request of her beloved husband, and this is to kind of, again, just reestablish their relationship together one more time. I don't think she's insecure. I think these are just words of love and appreciation. I've never given up on you. All I've ever wanted is to be with you. And so this is just kind of a statement of, let's just reaffirm that once again, because it's a beautiful thing to let your partner know how much you love them. So she requests that he set a seal upon his heart to affirm their enduring relationship one another. Set me as a seal upon your heart. And the request is also, again, poetry stated in another parallel form. She also requests that he set a seal upon his arm in response to his love for her. So set a seal of me upon your heart, like protect our love in your heart, and also set a seal upon your hand, which I would take to mean your actions, right? The things that you do, let your actions always be consistent with the love that we have one for another. So internally, the inner self, the volition of the soul, and externally, the things you do, let's make sure that you have sealed our love, protected our love at all times. She then reminds her beloved that their love is as strong and unchangeable as death, right? Once someone dies, with the exception of either the Holy Spirit and the power of Christ raising them from the dead, or in modern sense of some medical things of shocking somebody back to life or whatever, basically when a person's dead, that it's like an unchangeable state. And so she says, our love is as unchangeable as death is unchangeable. Okay, that's how she's declaring her love to him. It's unchangeable. Death is the only thing that would separate our love, if you will. She then declares that allowing jealousy in any form into their relationship would be cruel and destructive as the grave is to the corpse. Now think about the imagery there. You put a corpse of a freshly dead body into a tomb or a grave, it's not going to stay freshly dead for long. It's going to begin to decay and corrupt and be, all that kind of stuff that happens there. So she says, jealousy would do to our marriage what death in the tomb does to a corpse that can only go one direction, and that's down towards ultimate chaos and destruction over the body that once was useful and healthy. So she doesn't want any jealousy in their marriage. And so the conditions that would allow any jealousy to invade their loving marriage must be guarded against. Let's make a pact, Solomon. Let's not let jealousy of our friends or other kind of activities that we engage in, let's not let jealousy destroy the marriage that we have. And I don't have any statistics on it that I would have looked up or anything like that. But you can imagine that out of control jealousy in a marriage could be very, very destructive. Oh, why are you always golfing every single week? Why don't you spend time with me? Why are you off there at your crafting event and you're never spending time with me? This whole sense of jealousy, even if it's not sexual or romantic, the sense of, I want all of your time and you're not giving me all of your time. And she's talking about this sense of jealousy in any form. It certainly could be. Don't stop looking at other people, stop fantasizing about other people or whatever else it may be. But I think it's more, or could be more broadly viewed as just lots of things can cause jealousy between spouses. And let's not let any of those conditions invade us, because allowing them and jealousy to invade our marriage could bring corruption and death to the marriage itself. But speaking directly to infidelity, I think she is making a reference to this. And again, I know I cannot begin to give you a reason or whatever with Solomon's 699 other wives and 300 concubines. But infidelity, she describes, is like flames of a raging fire that will destroy what they have together. So if you take Solomon and what we know about him and his life out of this, and you just say, let's talk about a healthy marriage between one man and one woman, infidelity can be like a flame of a raging fire that can destroy a marriage. And that's, I think, the message we're supposed to get. Let's stop talking about Solomon and whatever choices and mistakes he may have made and say a marriage where infidelity is introduced is in a deep crisis in terms of being able to be restored back to health. Doesn't mean health can't be restored. Doesn't mean infidelity can't be forgiven. But why would you introduce it if you want a healthy marriage to exist? Because certainly experience tells us infidelity can absolutely destroy a marriage. So then the Shulamite concludes this sort of, again, desire to declare her love for her husband and for hopefully him to respond in kind with his love for her. She concludes with some additional assurances of her own love for Solomon. And so she declares, many waters cannot drown the fire of her love for her husband. So obviously fire and water don't really mix, right? You got enough fire, it's hard for water to put it out. And if you have enough water, fire can't really resist the power of water to put out the flames. And she's saying her fire that burns in love for her husband, it would take far more than many waters trying to overflow that flame to put it out. That's a pretty strong declaration of love. My love for you is so burning powerful that a little drop of water isn't going to put it out. A little spits of water is not going to put it out. It's going to take a torrent of water and maybe multiple torrents of water for my love for you, she says, to even begin to be affected by that. And so she's kind of giving him not carte blanche to do any kind of horrible, terrible thing to their marriage, but she's saying, look how strong my love is. Take security in my love for you. It's like a flame that can't be quenched by lots of water. So not even a raging flood could wash away the love she has for him. And then she also, so that's one way of expressing her love for her husband. Another way, she says that if another man were to offer her all of the wealth of his household to entice her to abandon her love for her husband, his offer would be utterly despised by her. No man is going to come with, lots of gold. Of course, we know Solomon is rich and all that. Don't forget about that again. She's saying no one is going to come in with all of these enticements and try to get me to abandon you for whatever they're trying to offer me. My love is so strong that all the material things of this world or all of the other sort of, even immaterial promises or supposed blessings that some would offer, it's not going to cause me to go astray. Wow, these are incredible words of commitment by the Shulamite to her husband. My fire is burning strong, and nothing could possibly entice me to abandon it. So in short, the Shulamite love for her husband is so secure that no outside force could ever diminish what she feels or how she will act in response to the commitment that she's made to him. Those are really beautiful, beautiful words of commitment that a wife can say to her husband, or a husband in like kind could say to his wife. Okay, now we're going to get introduced to the Shulamite's overly protective brothers, just a couple of verses here, but her brothers are going to make a little speech here, and we're going to see that they're overly protective, and then she's going to immediately rebuke them for the way they sort of try to protect her after her marriage. So, Song of Songs, chapter 8 of verse 8. So this is her brother speaking. We have a little sister, and she has no breasts. What shall we do for our sister in the day when she is spoken for? If she is a wall, we will build upon her a battlement of silver. And if she is a door, we will enclose her with boards of cedar. It's like they don't want her to get married. They don't want her to think about their sister being in a marriage relationship, intimate or otherwise. Okay, so let's look at it from their perspective. It's good to be protective of your unmarried sister. It's good to be protective of your married sister. It's not good to interfere with the marriage of your sister with her husband that she loves, right? That's kind of the situation we're starting to see here in this. And maybe this was spoken some other time, but this seems to be, like I said, well deep into their marriage. But nevertheless, this is what they say and how she responds back. Or she will respond back in a moment. So the Shulamite, they consider her still to be her little sister, and they're kind of declaring she remains under our watchful protection. Even though the responsibility of her protection and her care has been transferred to Solomon, they're kind of saying, wait a minute, we love her too much to let our responsibilities for her care and protection be transferred at this time. So she's clearly of marrying age. We've already seen that they got married in chapter 4. And they may be nostalgically considering her to be like a prepubescent girl with undeveloped breasts or underdeveloped breasts. Though from Solomon's many references that we've already seen and her own references to her own chest, it's clearly no longer the case that she's flat-chested. Solomon seemed to me to make that very, very clear in chapter 4. So her brothers acknowledge that she was first betrothed to Solomon and has subsequently become his wife. But again, it seems like their commitment to protecting her, they feel, should not have ended yet. So if their sister were figuratively a wall, they would want to build a battlement of silver upon her to guard and protect her, I believe even by their own bloodshed, because silver is very often used in the Bible as an idiom or as a symbol for blood. So we're going to build these embankments or these battlements on top of a wall, and we're going to cover it in silver, meaning we would die to protect our sister. Okay, protect her wholesomeness, protect her from even people like her husband Solomon. They're just making this strong declaration, and I think that's good. Let's say the day before the wedding, hey man, if you hurt my sister, you're going to answer to me. That's some good stuff. But once she's married and once she declares that she's in love with her husband and happy about all those things, they're overreaching. They're overextending their protection, that may have been afforded to them as brothers. Think about, Levi and Simeon or in their response to the Dinah incident back there in Genesis 38, is it? No, 34, I think it is. Anyway, and they were so enraged that their sister Dinah was violated by Shechem. And so they're just overly protective, and they go off and they slaughter the entire Shechemite town. Again, they're being overly protective, and it's great to have care and compassion and love. It's not good to interfere with your sister's actual healthy marriage. This seems to be what we're, addressing or evaluating here. To go further, again, poetry often has sort of a double statement of the same thing. If she were figuratively a door, they would enclose and protect her with boards of cedar, meaning they're going to board up the door. Okay, there's this access. She's a door. We have access to her position or place, but we're going to board up the door, and we're going to prevent any assailant from entering into the protective presence that we have established for our sister. It all sounds noble. It all sounds, quite just loving, which it is, but contextually it's out of place and it's out of bounds of her true relationship with her husband. So she's going to respond back to her brothers. And so starting in verse 10, I am a wall, and my breasts like towers. Then I became in his eyes as one who found peace. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Haman, and he leased the vineyard to keepers, and everyone was going to bring its fruit, 1,000 silver coins. Well, that's a little poetic, so let me see if we can help unpack all of that. She responds, I think, directly to her brother's overprotective nature by stating that she is a figurative wall. That's fine. But no, she's not flat-chested like a prepubescent girl. Her breasts are like towers upon which a fully developed woman would bear them. So she's no longer an adolescent who still needs such chivalrous protection from her siblings. In fact, she's married to Solomon and is under his protection. And much to their chagrin or not wanting to hear what she has to say, she is not only under his protection, but she's made herself sexually available to him, even if her brothers have a hard time thinking of their sister in such a capacity. Many of us probably have that. If you're a parent with a child, even though you wish them well on their wedding day, you probably may not want to think about what happens when they take the limo to the hotel that night. Or maybe a brother has that same kind of hard time or whatever. They're having a hard time accepting her in that new role that she's in. But she is at peace now that she's married to Solomon. It's what she's always desired to be. It's what she, really feels God has equipped her to do, is to be someone's wife, and she's blessed to be Solomon's wife. She's blessed to have him as her protector, and she even enjoys the relationship, romantic, physical as it is, to be with her husband. And he has proven himself in her evaluation to be a good and loving husband to her. Her protection is now her husband's primary responsibility, not her brother's. So she rebukes them for, again, being overly protective of her now that she's married. Okay, and apparently Solomon, or perhaps his father David, somewhere in this family relationship, had leased out the vineyard to her family, and the family worked in the vineyard as part of their income and their family income and responsibilities. We saw that early in the chapter. Remember, she used to go out in the vineyard, and she was getting suntan and all that well before she and Solomon were married, if not maybe even before they were in their engagement process. And again, if she was David's radiating heating source, she may have been no longer working in those fields by the time she and Solomon get into a courtship relationship. Anyway, so it seems that either Solomon and or David leased this vineyard to her family, and her brothers were accustomed to working in that field. Okay, and so she's making reference to that she used to work in their field right alongside her brothers, and they're still working in that field. But then she makes this reference to Baal Haman. And we don't know, no scholars that I'm aware of know or can speculate as to where this place called Baal Haman is. But the Hebrew term seems to indicate or reinforce the idea that it means to be leased out, okay? That Solomon was the landlord to her family, and it was her family that was then working Solomon's vineyard for profit. Like they're sort of his employees, right? And so all she's done is move from being a vineyard keeper, vine dresser, or person who works in the vineyard, to now being his wife. Like he still always sort of had this, superior role to both her and her brothers, based on how they're making their living. Now, it was the role of her family to ensure that the vineyard produced fruit so the crop could be sold at market for the going rate of 1,000 silver coins. I don't know how many bushels or whatever all that would have equated to, but they know and she knows that they're supposed to work the vineyard. When the fruit comes in, you take it to market, and you're going to get compensated by 1,000 silver coins. That's why you want to lease the land from Solomon, and that's why Solomon receives money from you, because you actually have a productive vineyard. So why are you driving a wedge between me and my husband? You're employed by him, at least in some capacity, since he owns the field that you work. Okay. All right, so that's this little back and forth between the Shulamite and her brothers. She sort of rebukes them and reminds them, don't bite the hand that feeds you. You're working Solomon's field, right? And all that goes along with that. All right, so that brings us to the conclusion of the whole matter. I just kind of lumped these last several sections together, verses 12 through 14. But in my New King James, where they put section breaks or headings or whatever, each verse is its own little section. I just lumped them all together. Okay, so let's go through the last verses here. Verse 12. My own vineyard is before me, the Shulamite says. O Solomon may have 1,000, and those who tend to its fruit 200. You who dwell in the gardens, the companions listen for your voice. Let me hear it. Make haste, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountain of spices. Okay. So again, if we had this imagery or this actual declaration statement that she is a person who has a heritage working in vineyards, and her brothers still do. So she refers to her vineyard and her desire for Solomon to come and visit her at her vineyard. Okay. Now, as we've just discussed, the vineyard could be an actual vineyard that she used to work in before she got married, or well before she got married. We don't know. Which was and probably still is tended by her family, both before and after they were married. The reference to her vineyard could also be a more personal reference to her position as Solomon's beloved wife. And in doing so, come to my vineyard, Solomon. She's inviting him. Hey, once again, no shock now at this point. We're beyond being shocked by the things in the message, in the word here. She's inviting him to be sexually intimate with her once again, if that's one way to interpret the vineyard she's referring to. Now, here's where she says Solomon may have access to 1,000 vineyards. That could be a reference to his 700 wives and 300 concubines. I mean, Solomon was rich. He could have 1,000 vineyards. But it's just an interesting coincidence that he has 700 wives and 300 concubines, which totals 1,000. And she makes a reference at this stage of this conversation that he may have access to 1,000 vineyards, but the Shulamite still considers herself to be Solomon's special treasure. So either way, hey, our vineyard, the one that produces these grapes, is still the best one around, or I'm still, once again, my husband. So then she talks about those who are assigned to tend to the fruit of the vineyard will number 200. Okay, well, let's talk about that. It's most likely a reference to one single vineyard that the Shulamite considers to be her own, because it seems like 200 men trying to work 1,000 vineyards is a little bit short-staffed. So I'm guessing it's 200 men working a single vineyard. Now, he's got lots of money. He can pay lots of workers to work as many vineyards as he has. So, he's putting 200 workers to work this particular vineyard. So maybe it's nice and large. I don't know. Or requires lots of maintenance. I don't know. If it's an actual vineyard, then many workers are charged with, of course, keeping this wonderful vineyard that she's referring to productive and profitable for Solomon and for the men who work it, or the family who works it. Still, the Shulamite is the one who has this special relationship to him, and she's inviting him specifically to this vineyard. On the contrary, or as a secondary interpretation, if the reference to the vineyard is symbolic, meaning her love for him, her availability for him intimately, then it may be that Solomon has assigned 200 servants, maybe you'd call them eunuchs, to care for his one Shulamite bride. That doesn't actually seem out of bounds, that he loves her and he provides these 200 servants to make sure her house is well prepared for, and her meals are well prepared, and her clothing is always clean and made, continued made new, and that, they're feeding her grapes, or however you want to picture a queen with all kinds of privileges taken care of, and maybe she has, other things she delegates responsibilities to. I don't know. There's either, to me, the two best interpretations, and neither one makes any huge difference in our overall understanding of things. There's 200 workers working in an actual vineyard, or there's 200 servants serving her as queen, as Solomon's number one wife in the relationships that he has. So then in verse 13, Solomon responds back to his wife, the Shulamite, by calling her the one who dwells in the gardens, perhaps the choicest accommodation among all of Solomon's houses, right? Okay, so he's got lots of choices, but the house that she lives in, or the body that she has for him to offer him, he's calling the choicest among everything that he possesses. So if he at this stage does have 1,000 relationships, and then he's still putting her number one in the list, which is at least nice considering the story that we're reading. Or he's got lots of houses. He's got a summer house and a winter house, and he's got a mansion over here. He's got all these different things, and he's got his his Shulamite bride positioned in one, and he thinks that's the best one. He gave her the best house that she can dwell in, while he has lots of other choices where he can call home or sleep at night. He declares that her companions, the 200 servants she referred to, he declares that they should hear her voice and respond to the authority that she has over them. Right? She has a delegated authority. He's king. He's husband. He's given her authority over these 200 workers or servants, regardless of what they do, as we've already sort of tried to speculate on. Solomon, however, greatly desires to hear her voice again for himself. Like she has the authority to command these servants to do whatever she wants them to do. But when Solomon's away, he can't hear her speak. He's almost like jealous, and maybe not jealous is the right word. He desires to hear what she speaks to her servants, because he's apart from her, and her voice is sweet to his ears. It soothes his soul and his spirit to hear his wife speaking. How beautiful is that? I long to hear my wife speaking, and I kind of have this almost jealousy that she's speaking to the servants I gave her rather than me. Not in an inappropriate way, just I can't always be there all the time. And so he's just pleased with his wife and wants to hear her voice. So then the Shulamite welcomes her husband and her lover to come and resume their marital relationship and intimacy that goes along with that. Once again, so she's the last one to speak here. Last verse, chapter 8, verse 14. She actually essentially says, "Make haste and come to her like a swift gazelle." Okay, I mean, it's like, why would you wait? Let's go. Let's get to this thing. Let's get to be intimate once again. I desire you. You desire me. Let's stop the conversation, and let's get to the pillow in the bedroom, and let's get going here. She then also requests that he come to her like a young stag, which I interpret personally to mean to come copulate with her again. So come swiftly like a gazelle, travels very effortlessly over the land and very quickly over the land, and come like a stag who has one thing on his mind, well, let's be intimate together. And so she invites him in that way to do so. And then finally, she refers to her body as the mountain of spices upon which Solomon should take his pleasure. For she is more than ready to be intimate with him in much the same way she desired to be with him on their wedding day. There's been no diminishing of her desire any more than it was on their wedding day. Here it is. Let's just pretend that it's 30 years later. She's saying, come to me just like you came on our wedding day. I'm just as ready and desiring to be with you as we were on our wedding day. Which is exactly what you would hope all healthy marriages that have a sexual intimacy continuing on would be. That it's not just this, have to do some chore or responsibility, that it actually meets very much, and maybe even more so. Maybe even 30 years later, it's more pleasurable to be in this physical relationship than it was on their wedding day when everything was just sort of weird and awkward and whatever else goes on. All right. The beauty of the Song of Songs is that it shows an idealized marriage. Yes, we can criticize Solomon's choices once again. Let's not be overly harsh at this point. It's a song. It's the Song of Songs. It's presenting an incredibly idyllic marriage relationship. Yeah, she may have made some mistakes. He certainly has made choices that we wouldn't recommend for marriage. But it's an idealized presentation of a beautiful marriage that endures, that is continue to show a love and a desire and a passion, spouse to spouse, all the way through the marriage. And so we want to see the whole thing from courtship to wedding day to fully mature and healthy and beautiful marriage all the way to the last day. And that's, I think, the message. That's why this book is in our Bibles, as uncomfortable as some of the descriptions and imageries may be. It's in here to show us a beautiful, beautiful marriage from start to finish. It also, hearkening back to earlier chapters, indicates that to all couples of all time periods, waiting for sexual intimacy before marriage is difficult for both partners. To have to wait. I love this person. I want to spend time with them. I know that when this date on the calendar arrives, we are going to be intimate. It's hard to wait. Okay. However, and I think this is really clear by the Shulamite's confession many, many times. Maybe we should have desired to hear at least once or twice from Solomon, but I think the message is clear to the couple. Waiting until marriage to be sexually intimate is immeasurably satisfying once that blessed day arrives. You don't have any of the guilt. You don't have any of the shame. You don't have any of the, we've already been here and done that, so our wedding day isn't all that special. It's waiting makes it really, really satisfying to both of the spouses or partners once that beautiful day arrives. And that's what the song is trying to communicate to everyone who has not made a decision to be intimate before marriage yet. It's a reinforcement and a statement, no, stay true to the celibate life until marriage comes. Let it be that day when you actually allow things to happen. Additionally, excessively fantasizing about intimacy during the courtship period makes waiting for the day to come extremely difficult and extremely frustrating. Try, as much as the, burning of the loins may be going on, do our best to set those things aside and focus on other things and let that day come naturally rather than, again, letting frustration just build up in the midst of everything that's happening. It is better to focus on the preparation for the ceremony and preparation for life together, like husband, go build the house. Bride, make sure that your wedding dress and your, flower arrangements and all these things, focus on the details and don't focus on the event of sexual intimacy. That will help get you to the marriage, however long the courtship period may be. So That's, I think that the instructions from the Shulamite to us and to all couples, especially those who are engaged or in a courtship period, focus on the good aspects of what's coming. Don't focus on the things that will, absolutely invade your mind with frustrations and desires that cannot be morally engaged in. Now, the wedding, I think the book also here, the Song of Songs, it communicates to us that the wedding is a significant milestone event. Let's not make it just like, oh, yeah, we got married. We were living together for 15 years, and we finally decided let's tie the knot and, we'll have a little party and we'll move on. No, it's a big milestone event, and the couple should take care to make that day memorable for their spouse, as well as to make it so that it can be celebrated as a wonderful occasion with family and friends. That's not just a modern America kind of way of looking at marriage. We see this in the Old and New Testaments about, how it should be. It's certainly the wedding at Cana, in John chapter 2 and all that. We should see, should be a celebration, and we should be inviting others to join us in our somewhat euphoric day of celebration when we come together. And let's also acknowledge that this book teaches us that sexual intimacy in marriage is not only morally correct, there's nothing dirty or wrong or unhealthy or anything about sexual intimacy in marriage. It should be viewed as one of the most essential activities within the marriage to keep the marriage healthy and to keep eyes and hearts and other parts of our bodies from wandering astray because we don't feel satisfied in the marriage relationship that we've been engaged in. And so God designed sexual intimacy. And it's clear from lots of places in Scripture, but definitely in the Song of Songs, that sexual intimacy does not need to include only a desire to procreate. It has to do with relationship health, husband and wife, in addition to what the right way or the moral way to have offspring. And we know from Hebrews 13:4 that the marriage bed is honorable. We take that to mean don't be ashamed of what the couple decides to do in marriage. And I'm not going to go into things. I do think there's things that couples shouldn't engage in. I don't think you say everything that you can do sexually in the bedroom just because you're married is right in bounds. I think there's some things that God would describe as not right, certainly, we know, not healthy for people's bodies to engage in certain things. And usually those kind of, I'm going to say somewhat or entirely perverse activities are usually thought up because too many people are looking at porn and think that somehow porn is a natural thing that's supposed to happen and they should be, engaged in proper healthy. That doesn't mean, there's only one way to engage in actual intimacy, but we should be we can't just use like something like Hebrews 13:4, the marriage bed is honorable as an excuse to go, well, we can do whatever we want. We can watch porn while we do this, or we can use the body the way God didn't intend the body to be used in these kind of things and all that. But the husband and wife should offer many compliments and expressions of love to one another regularly. I think it's good. We see this throughout the entirety of this 8-chapter book. He compliments her at the highest level of words and expressions he can use. She compliments him at the highest level of words and expressions of love that she can convey, and it lasts from before the courtship or in the courtship all the way through to their very last encounter that we see recorded. And so I love you. You look beautiful. Oh, aren't you so handsome and strong and whatever? Give compliments where compliments are due and express that even if things have deteriorated, doesn't mean you can't say, well, I still love you and I love you now. And things aren't the way they were because no one can maintain a 20-year-old body when they're in their 50s or 60s or 80s. So we have to appreciate them for who they are at that time and moment in our marriage. So while the marriage bed is honorable, it should be a place of, I believe, we see in Scripture and we see here in Song of Songs, a place of mutual respect and deference to the needs of the other partner. Coercion, manipulation, ignoring comfort boundaries that one may have versus the other cannot be justified as a reason to force act of intimacy on one another, right? And we'll see here when we get to 1 Corinthians 7, you can't say, whatever the old excuse is, I have a headache for 6 weeks in a row, and go, that's just not going to happen. It should be mutual, recognizing when I came together in marriage, I gave myself sexually to my partner, and he or she gave themselves to me. And so I don't get a lot of options to say no when there's not actually a physiological reason for saying so. It's not just this whole forced and coercion and, my needs are here and your needs are here, so you have to meet me up here kind of thing. There's got to be a loving mutual balance in how these things are engaged in. There's nothing wrong with this book also teaches us there's nothing wrong with appreciating the physical attractiveness of your spouse. Those in marriage should seek to avoid any comparisons to other people so that every gaze can be upon their spouse. It will be in pleasure to behold them and them alone. Like if you have no one else to compare your wife to or your husband to, well, then they're the most beautiful person you've ever seen. So if you're not walking around going, boy, I wish I was on the beach with all the bikinis walking around, I could get this eye candy flowing into my brain. You just go, no, I don't look at that stuff. I just look at my spouse. I look at my spouse. That I have one person to compare my spouse to, and that's her or him, and therefore they're always at the top, right? I mean, I think that's the way we're called to live this society of all the comparisons and all the lusting and lust of the eyes and lust of the flesh and all that stuff that certainly has been around for thousands of years, but is certainly more challenging, or it seems more challenging in 21st century America with screens and with very little modesty in the world that we live in. You kind of we absolutely, in my opinion, have to make a conscious choice to say, I'm going to choose my spouse to be the most attractive person to me, and I'm going to do everything I can to make that not just a statement, but an actual reality that is in my mind and in my heart. I think that's good advice. Long ago, in our marriage, Kimberly and I, there used to be times when she'd go, can you believe what this woman's wearing? She doesn't do that anymore, because she knows I really don't want to see that stuff. It used to be kind of fun to, oh wow, that's stupid, or I can't believe that somebody has so little modesty or whatever. But she doesn't even talk about it. We don't even mention it anymore because I don't want to even think about somebody attractive or not attractive wearing something that is supposed to entice or would entice or whatever. Okay. After the wedding, challenges and doubts about the continued love for a spouse could indeed creep into any marriage. But I believe both partners should seek to restore the marriage to full health and to reassure their partner of their unshakable love, like we looked at here tonight with a torrent of water not being able to put out a flame, or other kinds of imagery there. You say, I love you so much, nothing will drive me away from my love and commitment to you. We see that as a message in the Song of Songs. So marriage, as again shown and demonstrated here in Song of Songs, marriage is designed to be a lifelong commitment. Each spouse should make regular efforts to make their partner feel special, loved, appreciated throughout their married lives together. And I believe we should thank God for creating marriage and using healthy marriages, as was demonstrated in the Song of Songs, thank Him for the incredible and enduring love that He has shown to His people. Of course, in His sense, it would always be asexual. I told you at the beginning of the study, I don't ascribe to the Song of Songs as really a picture about God's love for us. No, there's way too much human physical intimacy in here for me to try to whitewash that and say, oh, it's really about God. But it does show that there is this sense of this lifelong loving commitment relationship that is of the highest order of magnitude. And when we take the sexuality out of that and we go, that's how much God desires to be with us or longs to be with us in a wonderful, beautiful, creator-created relationship that has, again, had nothing to do with sexual intimacy. We see that in this book. And so that's the one place where I'll say we can make the parallel connection. God loves us the way the Shulamite loves Solomon and the way Solomon loves the Shulamite, but we don't have to get gross or weird and talk about God and sex and that kind of thing. That's just totally out of bounds as far as I'm concerned. Okay, let's finish off our study with looking at 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 1 through 9. Paul addresses this, and I think that's really the only place in the New Testament and really much any place outside of the book of Song of Songs where we see some actual instructions to husbands and wives that we should probably make sure we incorporate into our thinking, certainly if we're married, or certainly if we are counseling friends, family, children, grandchildren on how to engage in their own marriages or everything associated with it. So let me just read, and we'll finish off, and then all the discomfort about talking about sexual intimacy will be done for mostly forever. But I love this study. This has been to me, this has been fantastic, and I think every marriage or potential marriage should be considering the truth that is described and presented here. Okay, back to Paul in chapter 7 of 1 Corinthians. Paul says, "Now concerning the things of which I wrote, which you wrote to me, it is good for a man not to touch a woman. Nevertheless, because of sexual immorality, let each man have his own wife, and let each woman have her own husband." Don't worry about that. The word woman and wife is totally interchangeable in the Greek. There's nothing weird or different about it. It's woman, wife, same word. Have her own husband. Let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another, except with consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer. And come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. But I say this as a concession, not as a commandment, for I wish that all men were even as myself, but each one having his own gift from God, one in this manner and another in that. But I say to the unmarried and to the widows, it is good for them if they remain even as I am. But if they cannot exercise self-control, let them marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion. So if you didn't catch it, he's clearly talking about the need that people have for sexual intimacy. And there's a good way, and that's in marriage, and there's a completely immoral way, that's outside of marriage. And there is some people have a gift of completely remaining celibate and single. And if you have the gift of celibacy, you shouldn't be married. And if you don't have the gift of celibacy, you pretty much, he's telling you better get married or you're going to burn with passion, and you're going to need to, the only moral outlet for that is marriage. And then once you're in marriage, couples need to make sure they recognize, I got married so that my spouse could enjoy sexual intimacy, and therefore I need to make sure that that is part of our ongoing regular marriage, connection one with another. Okay. So yes, Paul endorses celibacy for those who have that gift of chastity, and it's especially good for those who want to serve God. I didn't read it here, but he talks about how they're completely undistracted. If you have the gift of celibacy and you're called into ministry, man, you can just serve God 100% of your waking hours and not be worried about your spouse, not be worried about your children and all of that. But clearly, God is not calling 100% of the population to, celibacy, because then in one generation, everybody would be gone, right? So there are a few people who God does in fact call to celibacy, or gifts them, or maybe if you got divorced or your spouse died and you're a widow or a widower, and now God is like going to gift you this celibacy gift because, well, that's the best thing for you in the season of life. But it's a great way to serve God, completely unshackled. But I do believe the Catholic Church completely monkeyed that up by trying to force everyone who serves in ministry at a priest level or above or whatever, that they have to be celibate when God didn't give them the gift of celibacy. And so among many, many challenges in the Catholic Church, they've completely monkeyed that thing up by trying to force people who burn with sexual passion into a lifestyle of celibacy, lacking the gift that the Holy Spirit would give them to maintain that celibacy. Yeah. Yeah. Well, sure. I mean, I would say celibacy is the 100% complete lack of any sexual activity or sexual gratification. And it's not just solo, and it's not just not being married. Celibacy is this person has basically completely abandoned or never maintains any kind of sexual activity, sexual desire within them. Okay. No. Yeah. They don't look at the same sex. They don't look at the opposite sex and go, if I wasn't celibate, boy, that would be nice. They're not, it's just not there. And I think that's exactly how I would describe Paul. No, I didn't walk with Paul. No, I can't tell you anything about him beyond Scripture. But I think Paul had the gift of celibacy. I don't think he ever was even remotely tempted by a woman that passed him by and thought, she smells nice or she looks good, and thought, maybe I should abandon my celibacy. It's just not there. It's completely absent from his constitutional character to desire that sexual, which to me says very, very, very few people have that gift of celibacy. But there are some in Paul's day, and I think there's still some in our day, who it just doesn't enter their mind. They're not interested in that. Doesn't mean they don't want to have friends and whatnot, but again, forcing celibacy externally, but not externally from God, to me seems like a recipe for disaster. And so therefore he says, if you burn, then one of your objectives in life is to find a marriage partner. Okay. So for those who do burn with sexual passion, marriage is the God-ordained prescription, and there is no other. It's not self-gratification. It's not one-night stands. It's not anything else. It's if you burn with sexual passion, your God-ordained prescription is to be married. Sexual immorality of all forms and natures is sin and will not be excused because God has granted us a way of escape from our sexual immorality through marriage, through fidelity in marriage. And so we can't blame God because he created sex and I don't have a partner. No, I mean, he's given you an option. Surely people who desire to be married can ultimately find a partner if they have to deal with their sexual burnings. And I've said before in other things, in other contexts, that where was I going with that? I don't know. If you burn, you've got to, it's a clear indication that God has equipped you for marriage, right? And so, and it's generally speaking, in most of the Old and New Testament era, meaning the first century, it was basically expected everybody be married, and if you were divorced, it was still expected you got remarried. If your spouse died, it was generally expected that you'd get remarried. There talks about widows and things like that in First Timothy and whatnot, but generally speaking, it was the vast majority of the population was married, and for this very reason. All right, so Paul commands husbands to then, and I think this is like marriage is voluntary. I know some marriages are arranged and things like that, but marriage is generally speaking, you agree to be married. And when a person agrees to be married, they are voluntarily giving control over much of their sexual intimacy, frequency, and whatever, to their wives or to their husbands, right? So he commands wives to give control over her body, their sexual intimacy to their husband, and the wife to the husband. You go, well, then no one's in control. I mean, if he's got control over her, but she's got control over him, well, who's in control? But this is that, again, this whole sense of we come together and we mutually want to please the other person. We don't want to coerce and force and these kind of things. But we also never want to go, well, I won't if you won't. And there needs to be actual conversation. And healthy marriages will actually talk about it in terms of what the partner needs and likes and dislikes and those kind of things in terms of getting this, making sure that you are doing what 1 Corinthians commands, and that is that he has control over you and she has control over you, and then you come together with love, mutual love, respect, and care for what the other person needs and also dislikes or doesn't want. In other words, sexual intimacy should not be arbitrary or punitive, or arbitrarily or punitively restricted in marriage. Some people will use sex as a tool or a weapon to get some other thing that they want. I think that's very much out of bounds. And restricting sex is, as a way of punishment. I think that's, you got to fix the problems if you're having some other issue. You spouted off and said some words you shouldn't say. Well, you don't just go, well, I don't care that I'm mad. Let's go, in the bedroom. But in another sense, it does fix a lot of things to kind of go, okay, let's deal with the fact that we are, struggling right now. One of the ways we can bring health back is to let's be intimate and show our love one to another once again, so that we can maybe resolve some of those other issues. And maybe those issues wouldn't arose if we were actually being more loving and sexually intimate or complimentary of the person rather than trying to tear them down in the things we do. Well, certainly in this passage, no frequency is elucidated. The only condition he describes where intimacy can be deprived or held back is so that both spouses can spend a period of dedicated time in fasting and prayer, which obviously you're not going to fast for 180 days, right? So you might fast for a day, you might fast for a week, but you're not going to fast forever. And so he's like saying, if you pick that time and let it be for fasting and prayer to the Lord. But then when that season is ended, then come back together again. But again, couples have to set their own frequency. Some people, I don't know, I don't want to throw numbers out there too much, but 5 times a week might be normal for them. Another couple, once a week or a couple of times a month, or who knows what, might be normal for them, and no one is dissatisfied with that level of frequency. Okay, great. As long as no one's, complaining about too much frequency and no one's complaining about too little frequency, then that marriage is exactly where it's supposed to be. The primary justification given by Paul is so that Satan, who's an important adversary and uses sex as a way to tear people down and to destroy their spiritual walk with the Lord. Satan is an adversary, and the reason why God gave sexual intimacy in marriage in a fallen world is so that Satan would have virtually no opportunity to entice someone into sexual immorality. Because it's good with my spouse, why should I do something immoral with anything or anyone outside of my spouse? In the final analysis, couples should have a healthy, loving, and mutually respectful approach to their sexual intimacy. And Solomon and the Shulamite, as we've seen in 8 chapters here of the book of Song of Songs, represent, even if only idiomatically, if that's all you're willing to accept, that they represent a couple that maintained a strong relationship long after the pleasures and euphoria of their wedding night were over. And that's what I think the scriptures are calling all marriages and all couples and all spouses to consider for their own marriage. And so we shouldn't be afraid of the book of Song of Songs. We shouldn't be embarrassed by what it teaches. It should be a owner's manual for how marriages are done. And if you're not married, if you're a young teenager and you're on your path to getting married, use this book. You don't have to wait until you're 30 to read it. Use this book as an understanding of courtship, marriage, and wedding day and marriage, and sexual intimacy. And if you are married, then use this as an instruction manual for your marriage. And, if you're not married for whatever reason in your life at this season and you don't think you're ever going to get married again, well, use it as a blessing to others to guide them to why they shouldn't avoid such a challenging book that talks about breasts and pomegranates flowing and things like that. Get in the book. Don't worry about the titillation of the words, and get into the message that is incredibly beautiful, uplifting, God-honoring, and an incredible way to live a life as a couple. And everyone should be well instructed by that because God gave it to us as a gift. I'll close out our study with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.